Hey guys, the last bit of information about the 3rd anniversary just dropped, which are the Rhiannon portraits. That is the information that I've been waiting for, because that enables us now to update everything. Character tier lists, team tier lists, pull plans, etc. So a lot of exciting content is coming up, please stay tuned for that. Before we take a look at Rhiannon's portraits though, please ensure that you know at least the very basics of Rhianna's kit and what she actually does. Even though I will explain portraits in deep detail and break them down to tell you exactly what they do, things might still become a little bit too complicated if you have zero clue of what Rhiannon actually does. Go ahead and watch my video in which I break down Rhianna's kit. I will leave a link to that one in the description down below. Okie dokie, here we have her kit, just to make it easier on myself to explain to you what these portraits actually does and for a little bit of reference. But now let's hop in. Her portrait number 1, as you can see right here, what does is you start the battle off with 5 Moxie already accumulated. Your incantations number 2, Song of the Birds buff, damage increases by 15% each. Okay, what is the Song of the Birds buff that is applied to us whenever we would use our incantation number 2? That buff increases for all allies the incantation might and ultimate might. Normally, this would be an increase of 30% incantation might and 30% ultimate might. With our portrait number 1, we buff the incantation might and ultimate might by 45% each to all of our allies instead of just 30%. And of course, don't forget about the fact that we start the battle off with 5 Moxie so that we can immediately cast our ultimate on the very first turn. So pretty huge P-run right here. But things get way better and much more complicated with her portrait number 2. Let's take a look at it. What it says is, entering battle increases energy funneled to 85%. Energy increased by 10% whenever you consume a stack of cooperating cinch. Increase stacks of Meeting of Mind to 3, and we can now hold 7 stacks of Meeting of Mind instead of just 5. Afflatus multiplier is increased by 5%. Damage dealt by Wormy Blackberry Summon is increased by 3000% plus additional 200% for every stack of Meeting of Mind. Okay, let's break this down. What does this mean? When entering battle, we funnel energy into a bar, and whenever we would consume a buff called Cooperating Cinch, we would funnel even more energy into this bar. How much energy we funnel is pretty drastically increased by our portrait number 2. This is, by the way, the most important part of our kit by far. This is the mechanic that makes Rhiannon an absolute must pull. This is why this character is turbo broken. We want to funnel energy into the bar, because whenever the bar would be fully charged, we would gain an extra turn. And that is what we are all about. Keep that in mind. Okay. Then, of course, we increase the stacks of Meeting of Mind obtained to 3 instead of just 2. That is very important, because Meeting of Mind is a force field that increases our Afflatus advantage multiplier, and it does so since it is a force field for all of our allies. And this force field, we can gain stacks for it. The more stacks we have, we increase the afflatus advantage multiplier for all allies more and more and more. Normally we would gain 2 stacks of this, but now we gain 3, and normally we can hold up to 5 stacks of meeting of mind at a time. With our portrait number 2, that increases to 7 stacks instead. Then the afflatus multiplier that I was just talking about is now increased by 5%. That is quite massive. Don't underestimate it. We are not talking about an increase of 5, but we are talking about percentages here. That is always quite massive. Then the damage dealt by Wormy Blackberry Summon is increased by 3000%. 3000%. Gigabusted, you know what I mean? But again, I say gigabusted, but it is actually like not that crazy. Why is it not that crazy? Because with Rhiannon, we are not here to deal damage. We are here to support our team, to buff our team, and to grant our team extra turns. We are not a damage dealer. Okay, but at least with our portrait number 2, we do in fact deal at least some respectable damage here. So not too bad. And then additionally, the damage is further increased by 200% for every single stack of meeting of mind. And remember, we can have a total of 7 stacks of that. That would be a massive increase for our follow-up attack, I shall say, or an extra attack is in that very case more accurate. Moving on to portrait number 3. I will not read this off, I will explain it while we read it together a little bit here. Our incantation number 1 would decrease the critical defense of all enemies. And it would further decrease the critical defense even more based on the number of meeting of mind stacks we have available. The portrait number 3 increases how much we decrease the critical defense of our opponents, like further, you know, by 20% and more and more and more. All you have to know is we decrease the critical defense of our opponents more with our portrait number 3, with our incantation number 1. We can see here that we consume the buff Cooperating Cinch to increase our self-attack. With portrait number 3, the attack increase here is higher by consuming this Cooperating Cinch, right? The attack increase that we gain is increased. And additionally, each stack of meeting of mind increases our incantation number 1's damage further by a maximum amount of 21%. So the point of portrait number 3 is to make our incantation number 1 much more efficient. Okay, then portrait number 4 does the following. Here I will read it out first. Our ultimate's buff called Dustbrute Eagle would let me explain it here. Our ultimate, it gives us a buff called Dustbrute Eagle that increases the maximum amount of attack and HP based on how high the attack stat of Rhiannon is and how high her max HP is. So the more attack stat we have on Rhiannon and the more max HP have with Rhiannon, the more we increase these exact stats for all of our allies. That is of course very beneficial for, let's say, Plan Prompto, because if we increase the entire team's attack stat, that increases the entire team's damage by a whole bunch, because of our impromptu incantations. They depend and they are all about dealing damage based on how high the attack stat across all of our team actually is. You know how that works. Same goes for Blood Tide with the maximum amount of HP. So very, very good to increase these stat increases here by 10% each with our portrait number 4. Additionally though, the maximum possible increases here are increased. So what does that mean? We can, let's say for example's sake, we have an attack stat of 5000 of 5k, but now without the portrait number 4, only 3k of our 5k would be shared across the team. With P4, this attack stat is increased. We do not share 3k, but we share, let's say for example's sake, 4 or even more than 4k, right? And then at 10% of that what we increase on top of that. So we would actually with P4 contribute our entire attack stat to the whole team, almost at least. That it is what it does. Yeah, to say it as simple as possible, we share more attack and more maximum HP, way more with our team, which again for especially for Plant Prompto and for Blood Tide is pretty gigantic. Okay, now let's take a look at portrait number 5. Here is a comparison to portrait number 2, because portrait number 5 is just a way better portrait number 2. Let's read it. At the start of the turn, gain 2 instead of just 1 stack of Cooperating Cinch. Energy funneled increases to 100%. Energy is increased by 12.5% whenever you consume a stack of Cooperating Cinch. Increase stacks of Meeting of Mind to 4. We can now hold 10 stacks instead of just 7. Damage dealt by the Wormy Blackberry Summon is increased by 10,000%. That number is accurate. I do not get anything wrong here. My information is 100% accurate, and you heard it right. The Blackberry Summon damage is increased by 10,000% instead of, like, compared to portrait number 2's 3,000%. Plus an additional 500% for every stack of Meeting of Minds. Alright, now let's talk a little bit about what this means. What portrait here shall we get? What is the recommended amount, and why is the recommended amount the actual recommended amount? You might immediately say P5. We got a P5er, that damage increase that we get there with like 10,000%. Are you kidding me? That is so broken, we gotta get it. There's no way around it, right? That is not true. Because you heard me earlier say that we do not play Rhiannon. I know everyone is obsessed with just damage numbers and they disregard anything else. Don't worry about that though. Like, hear me out. Rhiannon is not here to deal damage for us. She is a support character. Her damage pretty much doesn't matter. And we already get a high enough damage increase with our portrait number 2. That is already kind of useless even in of itself, but it helps out because P2 is what we get anyways. That is the recommended amount, and you gotta pull for Rhiannon. That is an absolute must pull, and you gotta P2 her. There's no way around it, and that is because of the fact that the energy that we funnel is increased to 85%. What that leads to is we get a whole turn of advantage. Without P2, we would gain the extra turn, right? From funneling this energy into our bar, we would gain the extra turn on turn 3. With portrait number 2 though, we get this exact extra turn on turn 2. And that is what makes multiple universes of a difference. I pointed out enough times in multiple of my previous videos, especially in the one where we talk about the P2 scenarios for both Liang Yue and Chen Higuang. I explain again in deep detail how incredibly important a turn 1 is, or one turn is. Let me give you a briefing on that real quick one more time. You know the fact, everyone knows that how much we value portraits that increase the number in which AP plus 1 lasts. Everyone always values Flutter PHP1, LFP1 and stuff like that extremely highly. Everyone recommends these portraits, we gotta get them, it's a must-have. Why? Because our AP plus 1 is, the duration is increased by 1 turn. That's how important a turn actually is. Right? It goes way beyond that, but yeah, let me cut it short here. 1 turn is everything. So that's why we have to get the portrait number 2. Now you might ask, wait a minute bro, the portrait number 5 funnels even more energy into the bar. It would give us turns even faster, right? Why not get P5 then if you value the P2 so highly? Let me explain that. It's very simple and straightforward, because the portrait number 5 does not increase our speed. We still get the extra turn on turn 2. The portrait number 5 does not lead to us getting the extra turn on turn 1. That's why it is not that important. To give you the exact value that this portrait number 5 has is that compared to P2, right, we generate an extra turn every 5 rounds, every 8 rounds, we would gain another extra turn. That is not worth it. Most battles do not last that long, right? So this is pretty useless, and especially considering the fact that you would have to go all the way. You would need to gain 3 extra portraits on top of already gaining the P2, right? And then all this would do to you effectively is to give you 1 more round, 1 more turn every 8 turns though. That is not gonna be worth the investment by any stretch of the imagination. Even in long fight, right? You know, okay, you can say, yeah, like Tides of Thought and Main's Bulletin and stuff like that. There, this extra turn is actually really good. That is true. That is 100% true. But it is still, like, considering the content and everything, it's not gonna be worth the investment. That is true, right? That's the point that I'm making. I'm not saying P5 is like trash or waste or anything. P5 is pretty good, but not worth the investment. If you value only damage, right? I know for a fact most of the community, they don't see anything. They are completely blind. They only see these damage numbers, and that is all that matters to them. They don't look at anything else. If you belong to this group, yeah, then you got a P5 Rhiannon. There is no way around that, because the P5, it turns her into like a little bit of a sub DPS here. So if you only care for damage, then you gotta P5 her. You have no way around that, if that is the logic that you go by. If you value resource management and like effectiveness and efficiency for your account, then P2 is all you need, but you need that P2. I would even go as far and say, if you pull for Rhiannon, but you are not willing to P2 her for whatever that reason might be, I cannot even recommend you truly pull for Rhiannon at that point. I would like go that far. I would still, of course, recommend to pull for her no matter what, but I mean, just, you know, just get that portrait number 2, bro. Like, we P5 anniversary characters all the time anyways. And yeah, I'm gonna talk about this kind of topic in my future videos. They are upcoming. I will talk a little bit more about this, because in this anniversary we do not P5 one character, but those 5 portraits that we normally get anyways, they are distributed among a few different characters here, and I'm gonna tell you in my future and upcoming videos exactly where the portraits go and what the characters are and how many portraits you're gonna get for those exact characters and why. But for now, that's it for me for today, guys. Those were the portraits for Rhiannon and what they do. I hope that was fun and informative. If you enjoy or if you like Reverse 1999 content in general, please consider leaving a follow on my channel. I would really appreciate it. But until next time, take care of yourselves, have a great day, and we love this game.